This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And welcome to this edition of A Different Perspective. I am the host, Kevin Randle. Before I bring on my very special guest, John Greenewald, a bit of a rant, I think. I was doing some research into the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblin attack from 1955, and I came across a paper that had been written just a few years ago, and in it they claimed that the entity seen was a great horned owl, which I don't believe is correct, and that the hysteria was produced by the witnesses having been drinking. And they cited a publication by Isabel Davis and Ted Blocher, which was called, it had something to do with the case of Kelly Hopkinsville and other 1955 events. I haven't had a copy of that, and I have this up on my blog as well, so you can read the chasing footnotes aspect of it. But what got me was they cited Blocher's and Davis's work as their source for the idea that alcohol had been involved. And I went to that source and it said alcohol wasn't involved. On page 83, it was very specific, no alcohol. There was also a newspaper article that I found from the Project Blue Book files in which the law enforcement agencies who'd been out there to investigate, as long as other personnel, said that there was no alcohol involved. So I was a little distressed that here is this purported professional paper quoting a source saying the exact opposite of what the source said. You can read about all of that at my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, but I wanted to bring that up simply because what caught my attention was that the skeptics accepted this as truth without their skeptical investigation. They didn't look at the critical thinking aspect of this idiotic idea. They just accepted it as being true, didn't follow the sources or anything like that. And I thought, as a skeptic, you should be doing that on both sides of the fence. Those who believed it was some kind of alien event should be looking at it skeptically. Those who were skeptical of the event should be looking at the solution skeptically, and they hadn't done that. I just wanted to mention that before I brought John Greenewald on, and he's been on the program before. And I think you all know that he started at the age 15 when he was struck with curiosity that led off his lifelong journey, first researching the UFO phenomenon. And I point out, it's interesting that John has kind of spun his interest in UFOs and FOIA requests and all of that into a career. And I was thinking about this the other day. My hobby began as a teenager studying UFO reports, as kind of spun off into a career as well, hosting radio programs, doing books and that sort of thing. So it's interesting that a hobby or an interest has led us into an arena that we both kind of enjoy that way. He's been around investigating other niches of the paranormal. He has investigated nearly every government secret imaginable. He was a sophomore in high school when he first started his trek in 1966, which makes me sick because I was a sophomore in high school a lot earlier than that. And he had archived all research, have been responsible for getting hundreds of thousands of pages that have never been seen the light of day into the public domain. He has appeared on numerous television and radio programs throughout the world and is frequently sourced in various news articles and stories for his archive and his discoveries. John, welcome back to A Different Perspective.
I appreciate it, Kevin. It's good to be here. Thank you.
I thought we might begin by talking first about the UAP, their report that came out on June 25th, and get your reactions. I know you've done some publicly with that, but your reactions to the report. I mean, I was trying to think of a word to describe the report, the less than adequate report.
The letdown?
The C- high school report?
Yeah.
The 9 pages of nonsense?
Yeah, no, those are all good descriptors for it, that's for sure. My initial thought is probably echoed by much of your audience and you as well, probably, which was a letdown. I mean, it was 9 pages in length. There wasn't a whole lot in it. And at first glance, I was not only let down, but very surprised that there wasn't a little bit more to it. Not anything revealing. I didn't have high hopes that they were going to, reveal some extraordinary tidbit of information about UAP. But rather, I thought that there would be more debunking. I thought that we would see the leaked material that we all have kind of seen here in the last 6 months to a year come out. I thought we'd see the FLIR, the gimbal, and go fast videos in there that now are already released. But I thought we'd see some visuals of something, and nothing. So that initial letdown led to a little bit of encouragement after I kind of took a deep breath after the first time I read it and thought, okay, there's got to be something here. And I went through it again. And there are little nuggets here and there. And within a couple of days, ended up actually creating more than 50 Freedom of Information Act cases or mandatory declassification review cases out of that. And through about 14 different agencies, I think it was. So you have to look at the fine detail of what's in there to start tracking down what we really want. That report is not what we really want, but it started to give pathways to getting it. And so that's what I've done. And I don't know if you want to get into this part, but what I did the next morning was filed a case, not through the Freedom of Information Act. That would be United States Code, Chapter 5, Section 552. But rather, this is a different part of the Code of Federal Regulations. For anybody taking notes, it's Section 1704 out of Chapter 32. In essence, it allowed me to mandate that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence immediately review the classified version of the UAP report. That was Saturday morning that I filed. By Monday, I had acknowledgement with a case number, and it was filed. By Wednesday, they had the report in hand, and it was being processed. So I'm hopeful that at least a portion of the what we call the classified version will be released in part. This didn't get a whole lot of publicity, but on Sunday morning, to the credit of the DNI and the office within the Director of National Intelligence, we were communicating, myself and the PR staff. And what I was trying to get was an acknowledgement of how many pages, what else was there, media, was there photos or videos attached to the report? Like, what else was there? They were completely mum. But my case has produced that the classified version is 17 pages in length. So roughly twice the size, still very minor in my opinion, but I was able to get through my case already that they are reviewing 17 pages that encompass the classified report. So for me, that was kind of a win already, because now we know the classified version length, and we'll see what comes out of the case itself.
So you're saying the classified version is just 17 more pages?
17 pages total, so not more, but rather total, yeah. And I won't be surprised if the text in the public version is echoed verbatim in the classified version, and we'll see if that's the only thing they release, which will be a letdown, or that they'll release more. But one of the other impressions I got, I don't know, Kevin, if you got the same impression, was that it was very rushed. If you look at DNI reports, and I dug them up before this one was published, these preliminary assessments and these types of reports have usually much more detail, more formatting. Essentially, they look cleaner. They don't look like what we got. In essence, there's more time that's put in. And in my opinion, they had enough time to create one of those, like what I'll call a standardized report. Again, they have that format and they have that level of detail. This just didn't have it. And I don't know for sure, but I just felt like it was, smacked together in the last 5 days before it was published to us, just in order to get something out. I mean, that was how I felt.
I always thought of it as a high school report, and it's one of those deals where you're assigned. at the beginning of the semester, you will be required to give us X number of a report of X number of pages or something like that, and everybody waits till the last minute, and so it's very rushed at the end. I was also wondering, and you maybe can help me out here, it says they looked at 144 reports. Now, is that 144 separate cases, or is it just merely reports and it would be multiple people talking about one case, like 10 people on one case and 4 people on another case? Are there 144 cases, or are there just 144 reports?
All of that is unknown. I wish I had a great answer for you. I tried to get anything that I could that Sunday from ODNI's PR office, and they just won't talk. When it comes to my case itself, and then that's how I got the length, I did try and dig a little bit on that. Were there, was that 144 different incidents? Were there witness testimony, anything? And they won't budge. So even though I was able to get the length of the document, all the other details as it currently sits is a classified document. So until the review is complete, they will not talk about the content. The other key thing that I didn't point out yet was I really tried to push to see if there were any photos or videos attached to the report. So was it a 17-page document with a CD on top of it or DVD or whatever? They wouldn't budge on that either. So I wish I knew the details of the 144, but we just don't know beyond what's in the public version, which was a breakdown of how many were the ones that really were what I would say the more interesting cases versus the ones that may have just been a misidentified object or balloon or whatever it may be. But interesting to note, they were only able to solve one of them.
This reminded me quite a bit of General Shogun's report that went to Twining back in 1947, where he had, I think, 16 cases and there were 32 different witnesses involved. And Twining came out with a 3-page report that said basically, yeah, this is all real. We need to do something about it. And we'll start a project to look into it. And this seems to be like Twining 2.0. It's the same thing we got before, and now but it all delves back into the classified areas, which we're not privy to.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. One of the other interesting developments was that day that the public report was sent out, the Department of Defense had issued a memo essentially mandating that Department of Defense wide, they were going to be sharing this information, collecting UAP information. That to me was more of an interesting development than the report itself, that essentially they were saying, hey, look, we are going to take this seriously. We are going to investigate. And this is DOD wide. This isn't just a Navy thing. This isn't just an Air Force thing. This is DOD wide. And the DOD made it quite clear that day. So that was an interesting development. What happens, though, moving forward? And that's what's going to be key here, because what we did find out also is that within 90 days of the publishing of this report, Congress was going to be updated. So the social media chatter was, yay, we're going to have another report in 90 days. We're going to have updates or something. But nowhere does it indicate that it's going to be public. And on the contrary, the DOD and the government as a whole really has seemingly locked down the hope, if you pay attention, the hope that we'll get something more. I don't think we are. I think they're going to hold this very, very tight.
I need to interrupt here because we're going to have to take a break in just a moment. But the one thing that struck me is they lived up to the letter of their instruction, which was to produce a report. But it also struck me that this was a dodge. Yeah, we've done what we're supposed to do. We took our 180 days and we produced this report. And we've now lived up to that. It doesn't matter what the report says. It's just a way of keeping the information buried by complying to the instruction, but not the spirit of the instruction, sort of living by the letter of the law as opposed to the spirit of the law, that sort of thing. I'm here with John Greenewald. He, the host of The Black Vault, and his book is Inside the Black Vault, which is available on Amazon. My latest book is called UFOs in the Deep State, which looks into some of this kind of thing as well. So you might want to take a look at that. We will be back right after this with more information on a different perspective. So please stick around. welcome back. I am joined by John Greenewald here on A Different Perspective. We've been talking about the UAP report. And before we went to break, I was mentioning that I thought it was merely kind of a dodge to live up to the requirement issued by Congress to produce a report, but they just really didn't follow the spirit of law. I think given 6 months and the resources available to them, they would have been able to do a much more adequate job of looking at this. It looked like we just put it off till the very end and then just rushed something through. And I guess that was kind of your impression as well, John?
Absolutely. And to kind of further that point, if you look on the first page where they name all of the different agencies that they consulted with, they repeated the NGA. And so again, in essence, really kind of lending some credence to it being rushed. You know, I mean, they had the same agency listed twice in that list. So that's where I feel that, yes, you're on the right page there, where they just rushed it. You know, they had a mandate. They didn't want to be late. I was very surprised. I kind of, for fun, made a prediction that it would not be on time. It was, to their credit. Marco Rubio started saying the exact same thing in about a month or two to the run up of the publishing date, that he thought it was not going to be on time. So yeah, maybe it wasn't going to be on time, but then you have a powerhouse like Marco Rubio, whether you like him or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, he's the head of the committee, and it's a powerful one, and they were mandating that this report be done. And he was saying, yeah, well, they're probably going to, I'm paraphrasing, but drag their feet and not be on time. They probably internally went, okay, great. We can't let them be right on this. We got to get it done. And so they got it done, like you said, but was it what we needed? And I think the general public would absolutely say no. So that's why I immediately went after the classified version. And one more note on the classified version that did come from that Sunday conversation that I was having on and off all day with DNI was that the reason for classification, the only reason they gave, was sources and methods. So they said that essentially everything in that report was sources and methods. That was the only reason for the classification, but the determination and conclusion were the same. They were identical. So what they were trying to do is dispel the myth that the public gets one story and then Congress gets a secret other type of story. So they said no, that the end chapter, so to speak, the final conclusion was all the same. It just was sources and methods that made the extra, 8 pages in the classified version. The sources and methods made it classified.
Well, I think that's a dodge they've used before as well.
Yes, the NSA.
What's important is it's really not saying that UFOs are anything we need to worry about. It's where we got the information and how we gathered the information that is important, because it would reveal secrets that our competitors would love to have and we just don't want them to have. And I've always said, and I think I've said it on the program before, that if I was the president, I could get any information I wanted out of the government. And you go to the DNI or the CIA or whatever and say, I want all your information on UFOs. And if the director says, no, we can't give that to you, my next response is, you're fired, bring in your deputy. But I think what we see here is the dodge that they use. If I'm the president and I say to the director of Central Intelligence, I want your UFO stuff, he says to me, great, Mr. President, I'll gather that information for you and I'll get back with you later. I've got to check with some other agencies. We've got to clear this stuff. We've got to get it processed properly so we can give you a full and comprehensive report. And then they just we just didn't get it all done yet. We'll get it to you soon, and hoping that some other event transpires that would gather their attention. I think with Jimmy Carter, it was the Iranian hostage scandal or a crisis. With Bill Clinton, it became Monica Lewinsky. I mean, they just are there. They know how to manipulate the system so that they can keep the information buried that they don't want to provide to these elected officials who are transient. And we have to admit that. I mean, the president is a transient official, as are an awful lot of his appointees. But we also see some of those people coming back from administration to administration to administration, and they're kind of running the show, and the elected officials are gone after a while. So I think that's one of the way they dodged the question.
I often liken all of this situations to the greatest trick of a magician, which is, look at my right hand so you don't see what the left hand is doing. And I wrote about this in my book, and recently in the Showtime show that came out, I used the same analogy, and it was actually cool the way they cut it together in the Showtime series. But my point is that how they approach government secrecy is very much like a magician does his stage magic. And it is very much based on illusions, sleight of hand, and them essentially giving the impression of transparency when in reality they're not. And in that example you gave, which is a great one, where the president goes, they're not going to tell him no, but they'll give him the illusion, hey, here's everything. Or to the general public, hey, this is what we know about UAPs. And that's the illusion. But meanwhile, over here in the left hand, there's something entirely different going on. There's a much different or bigger story. And history supports that what we are told at the time is often revealed as wrong later on. And you look at stuff like the Glomar Explorer and Project Jennifer and all of these cover stories for what they were actually doing. That's the illusion. Tell the public one thing, but you're doing another. And with UAPs and UFOs, it is no different. And that's, I think, what we're seeing with a report like this, where they fulfilled their mandate and they're giving the aura of transparency. People saw that. A lot of them did lose interest in UFOs. If you watch social media chatter, people were let down. And is that part of the game? Not to sound conspiratorial, but there was such a buildup to this. And whether or not mainstream media is to blame, whether or not, the UFO community is to blame, it doesn't matter. There was such a buildup, and the buildup was so big, you couldn't get away from being let down. I don't think they could have given us anything except an alien body that would have fulfilled the excitement that people had. And I often ask, is this part of the game? Because now you have a certain percentage of people that for the last year have been so excited about this, and oh my gosh, we're getting a UAP report. This is great. This is disclosure. And then we get the 9 pages that we did. People lose interest. They go on to something else. And again, you have to ask yourself the question, is it all part of the illusion?
Well, I think you take a look back at the history of ufology. And we see this in the Robertson panel, which was the CIA-sponsored study in 1953. And one of the things they said, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some very mysterious cases, which we have since solved, as a way of debunking that and killing public interest in UFOs. They also suggested that they get in with the school teachers and tell the teachers, well, don't let the students write reports on UFOs or give them failing grades. Don't let them read books about UFOs, guiding their thinking. And that kind of reflects back to what I was saying at the very beginning of the program with the rant about here is an academic paper written, and they put this one note in there about Kelly Hopkinsville being the responsibility of some drunks, and they cite a source, and you go to the source and it says the exact opposite of it. But that is a refereed paper. I did write to one of the authors. I have not heard back from him about that and asked them specifically, the specific thing. Here's what you said, and here is what the source says. What do you make of this sort of thing? And I think that's what we see here, an ongoing program that was developed in 1953 to stop public interest in UFOs. And as you say, it's working now.
Yeah. And one other aspect to that, because you bring up a brilliant point, that it does tie back into decades ago, are these leaks that have come out in the last 6 months that, although they excite a lot of people, and myself included, in the sense that the government admits they're real, they won't say they're unidentified, but they admit that the videos are real. My question is why? Why are the leaks allowed to happen? And why is the Pentagon so quick to come back and say, well, yes, actually that is utilized by our UAP task force. And yes, that was captured by the U.S. Navy. We won't tell you if it's unidentified or not, but yes, everything else is real. That doesn't make any sense to me unless there's an underlying objective. And these leaked videos and some photos are, per the skeptics, fairly easy to debunk. if you look at some of the analysis and stuff like that. And so again, does this tie into the illusion that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes and the public gets all excited, but in reality it's not. And we're just waiting for that Condon report to come out or whatever that's going to come out that really just puts it all to bed. So that excitement that has built has already partially gone away, but then you're going to have another whammy, coming in 180 days, 60 days, whatever, but you're going to have something else that may take that excitement away. So it sounds really conspiratorial to talk like that there's this hidden agenda and program underway that we're not privy to. But that's what history has shown us that they do, and like you mentioned, the Robertson panel and stuff like that, where what should be in an investigation turns into an explanation. So they pull the science out of it and they put the objective into it and say, we need to make people lose interest. We need to take that threat away of people saying, we want to know more, make them lose interest. And that's historical fact. That's not conspiratorial. So to think that they're doing it again today is very plausible.
Well, I think that the one point that you've made, and I think I've made as well in the past, is the Navy and the Pentagon came out and said the videos are real, but they're not saying that the object is an alien spacecraft. They're just saying these are videos that were taken by Navy personnel and released to the public. So they're saying the videos are real, and some people translated that into being, they've admitted that UFOs are real. Well, they really haven't admitted that. All they've admitted is that the videos that we've seen are real. And I think that's one of the things that they're doing to kind of excite the public. And then when they come out with the explanations for this, I think that there was a YouTube video that I saw not long ago where a guy attached his cell phone camera to a night vision device and was getting some of the kinds of videos that the Navy had released. The triangular shaped or the pyramid shaped object was really a glitch based on the camera and the night vision sort of thing. And I think that what they've done is set us up to, we've got these really cases that we don't understand, and they're going to come up with an explanation for them. And it's going to seem very plausible, and people are going to say, okay, I've got it. And in fact, I'm going to take this to Roswell one more time, which is, I have heard recently a couple of people say that the Roswell case is solved by Project Mogul. And I'm thinking, I have spent 25 years denying that completely and totally, and here's why. And the documentation shows that it couldn't possibly have been Mogul. And yet that kind of explanation has filtered out into the public, and they've accepted it without any kind of critical analysis.
Yeah. Well, that's what they, meaning U.S. government and those types of officials, bank on, that you're not going to fact check or you're not going to take the time. You're going to take the surface story and that's it. And I think that again, that overall reality to the general public is that they won't be like you and I, and they won't dig. They'll just take that surface story, and that's what's very frustrating. And going back with the leaks as well, in that they won't give you that unidentified tag, that they won't say they don't know what they are. In essence, they're giving you part of the story. They're not lying to you. They're just kind of withholding the most important part, which is, are they able to identify this? Now, with the exception of the first 3 videos that leaked out, but then later were officially released, which are the FLIR, the gimbal, and the Go Fast, I was shocked when I was able to get the Navy to say, we have no idea what these are. And the official designator on those was unidentified aerial phenomena, and they considered them unidentified. So there's 2 ways to look at it.
Let's hold it right there, because I'm going to have to take a break.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt you, because you had a good thought going.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'll write it down because I'll forget it.
Yeah, I'll be back here with John Greenewald in just a minute. We'll finish up with that thought. You're listening to A Different Perspective on the X Zone Broadcast Network. We'll be back right after this, so please stick around. And I am here with John Greenewald. We're talking UAPs, and the term I hate with a passion. I like UFO because UAP just sort of drags it into the nonsensical range, calling it basically nothing at all. When we left, John, you were making a point about what they were, I think one of the methods of their madness in releasing the information. And I thought you should continue with that thought.
I appreciate it. So yeah, where I was going with it was, we know the 3 original videos were labeled as unidentified, or what they use as a designator, UAP. So there's 2 ways to look at the newest leaks and their lack of giving what they designate them. So do they designate them as UAP? Do they designate them as previously thought to be UAP, but they're drones, they're balloons, or whatever they may be? And they wouldn't give that. So the 2 ways that you need to look at it is they learn their lesson. That first time, it was September of 2019 that I got the Navy to go on the record about those 3 videos. They had never officially released them. But they gave me what they designated them, which again was that unidentified aerial phenomena tag. So did they learn their lesson? Because when I published that article, it went viral around the world. It was one of the biggest things I had ever written that created this media superstorm that the Navy was saying, we have no idea what these objects are. Well, that didn't look good. The optics were really bad, simply because they didn't want that attention. And here they got it. So did they learn their lesson? And now they go, look, do not give a designator out. Don't tell them it's unidentified. Don't tell them it's identified. Just leave it alone, and that's it. But why would they give you all the other details? It's very easy to say no comment with the U.S. government. So is it that? Or the second way you got to look at it is, they do know. They're just withholding that information, and this is all part of essentially we'll call it ufological Rosetta Stone, the way that they could decode when these UAP reports come in, and clearly there's a lot of them. The report referenced 144 events, so there's quite a bit. So we know through Project Blue Book that they had these reference documents, these books, photographs, stuff that they could look at and go, oh, this is what a comet bursting in the atmosphere will look like, or, oh, this is some of these are the fastest jets at the time, or, whatever it might be. We know for an undeniable fact that they had those documents. And so are these part of the present day primer, the present day reference material that they go, hey, look, these things with the 2 red lights that are circling around our naval vessels, well, those are Chinese drones, and here's some examples of it. Is that a possibility? Absolutely. We have no idea. But going to what you said, people don't dig. And so when they're told that these are UFO videos, they go, aha, this is UFO. See, the Navy doesn't know what these things are. And there were major mainstream outlets that ran that story. And for those who aren't aware, the video I'm talking about are the multiple, they look like helicopter lights, but regardless, multiple red lights on craft of some kind that are near a naval vessel. And again, no designator on whether or not they're unidentified, but major mainstream outlets tagged those as unidentified flying objects that the Navy was completely clueless about and had no idea what they were. And then that spirals down the hill to where skeptics come out and say, the Navy's so inept, they can't even figure out that these are drones of some kind or something like that. So are we ever going to get answers? So there's a snowball effect with false reporting like that. And I'm a big outspoken person about the media and how they cover this topic. And that is a direct reason why, because it doesn't sound like it's all that big of a deal if, let's say, a CNN or a Fox News or whomever runs a headline and says these videos the Navy can't identify. TMZ, I know, did it in their special as well, when in reality that's not true. But then the aftermath comes with the skeptics, the debunkers. They just want to make the topic look bad. They can easily pull that and go, look, this is explainable as a drone, and here's the flight path, or a bird, and here's why, or whatever the skeptical reason for that particular evidence is. So there is an absolute reason why someone like me gets all worked up and fired up when the media gets it wrong, because it's not just that headline. The snowball effect makes it a lot worse.
Well, to be fair to the general public, most people don't have the time that you and I have to devote to studying this, and they don't have the
Sure.
resources to dive deep into this. I look back and say, I know practically everybody in the UFO community. So if I have a question, I know who to call, I know who to go to. And I've made contacts all throughout the community, and I understand that. The best example I can think of is Larry Warren had talked about having been given a voice stress analysis by Larry Fawcett a number of years ago. Well, Larry Warren being involved in the Bentwaters UFO case. And I called Fawcett up and said, "You ever do voice stress analysis?" "No, I don't do that." And so I was able to debunk what Warren was saying because I happen to know Larry Fawcett, and I could call him on the phone and get that kind of information. The point simply is, you and I have the contacts, and this is basically our job, to dive deeper into these sorts of things. And I hate these cliches that keep coming up, like dive deep into the things. And now I'm using it myself. And that was what happened with the Kelly Hopkinsville thing. I found that paper and found that mistake, and I happened to have that book on hand so I could look to see exactly what it said. So we have to take a look at it that way. But a lot of people, as I mentioned before we went to the break, in the Roswell case, buy the mogul explanation. They don't understand that the flight that they claim was responsible, flight number 4, was canceled. The documentation is in the Air Force report saying flight number 4 was canceled. Well, if it wasn't flight number 4, then what was it? So we're back to where we were. We don't know what it is. It's not necessarily extraterrestrial. We just do not have a terrestrial explanation. And I think that's one of the things that we have to take a look at when we're looking at all of these sorts of things. So we're kind of stuck in the same limbo. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the Condon Committee in 1969, one of their issues was to determine whether or not national security was a problem with UFOs. Does it affect national security? Condon said no. They said there's no national security implications. This new report suggests there is a national security implication.
Yes. Yeah, and with the Condon national security risk, the only risk that they talked about was the American public, essentially overloading the systems and the infrastructure at the time. Now, yes, they do talk about this national security concern, and to be honest with you, I think that also there's a reason why they're saying it. I think that they can't get away from it, and when you talk about these craft, whatever they are, that are around naval vessels, and the pilots are encountering them in the sky, again, no matter what the root of the technology is or who operates it, that's a threat. So if, and a national security one at that. So if they tried at all to downplay that, I think the public outcry would be huge. So I think that they had to circumvent it and just say, look, just admit it. It's a threat, and we don't know what it is. And even though they may or may not, but that's a different story. But they had to do that because the power now versus in the 1960s is that we, the people, have a much louder voice, in my opinion. You have social media, you have campaigns that can be done much more easily. It doesn't cost money. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to picket. You don't need to make signs. You literally just sign online petitions and write emails and do whatever. My whole point is that's a much stronger voice. And the amount of attention that would have gotten if they downplayed that threat would have been too big. That would have created more of a spotlight than they want. So for me, I think it's part of the strategy. Just meet that head on, admit to it, and move on. And then you kind of take the wind out of the sails of the general public for arguing at least that point. And then you have to move on. A prime example of this, kind of switching gears, but a prime example is the official release of the 3 UFO videos. And I go back to when the Navy told me that they were unidentified, but at that time in 2019, they had not been officially released. And fast forward, what I did not advertise until it was over was that for 2 years, I had multiple cases that were attempting to get those videos declassified. I was aiming for higher resolution and longer ones, but I had cases for about 2 years arguing for that. The moment that they said that they were unclassified from the get-go, that to me put me in a legal position that there was no feasible way. Of course, they could try, but at that moment, there was no feasible way that the military could say, John, we're denying your request because it'll be exempted under B1 or whatever it might be. The fact that they were unclassified ruled all of that out. So they were in a conundrum. They were in a pickle. If they denied me, that would have been really bad. If they released them and I had to fight for 2 years to get them, that also likely the optics would be bad. So what did they do? They created a press release, published them online, released them out. And then within 60 minutes of them doing that, my case had a final response in my mailbox, because I think that they realized that there was no way of getting out of it, that they had to, because I could have done litigation after that, which, spoiler alert, I was planning on it if they were going to deny it. And they knew that there was no legal way for them to withhold it. So my whole point with those stories is that you need to minimize, you meaning the U.S. government, has to minimize the amount of controversy, exposure, and essentially the attention. And by meeting some of this head on, you kind of can't fight it. And that, yeah, they said it was a threat to national security. Well, that to me didn't have as much of an impact as if they said it didn't, because then we could use the actual evidence against them. So I think their tactic is essentially the same, but orchestrated in a much different way than the 1960s.
Well, I will say one thing, that the national security implication on this sort of thing sometimes has nothing to do with the actual object seen, but the way that information was gathered. And if you give out that information, you have now revealed something about your capability in gathering that data. And that would certainly have national security implications as well. So we have to take a look at all of that as well when we're looking at those sorts of things. Because national security isn't just a threat, but the release of information that could be harmful. I guess it is a threat, but harmful to the United States government in some fashion. And revealing our capabilities of gathering data could be harmful in that respect, or it might give clues about other aspects of it. You've probably seen pictures from World War II where they had pictures of ships, and the radar antennas and things like that were blanked out, so you couldn't see them because you were afraid that the enemy would be able to determine something about our capability by looking at, I guess, the shape of the antenna, the way it's structured, would give them clues on how good our capability is, or how to maybe duplicate that and catch up with us in that respect. So we have those sorts of national security implications that may fall into that arena. There was that document that Stan Friedman used to show that had all the everything blanked out practically except for a couple of words. And when we finally got the entire document, you realized it had nothing really to do with UFOs, but it had to do with not only the collection of materials of, I guess, on the Soviet Union, but the locations of those collection assets.
Yeah.
And a revelation of that sort would be very, very harmful to the intelligence gathering of the United States.
Yeah.
We're going to have to take the other break. It's coming up here in just a moment. When we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about abductions and the Travis Walton brouhaha that's been going on recently. Because I think that, that's another aspect of this thing that's of interest to an awful lot of people. And there's some interesting things that we can take a look at that might provide a little bit of a different perspective, if you will, about that. I also wanted to mention that there's some other fine programs about the paranormal that you can find at the X Zone Broadcast Network at xzbn.net. Take a look at the listings on the side of the website. Search down, you'll find a good program I'm sure that you'll want to listen to. And my favorite program, of course, is A Different Perspective. I suppose that's what surprised just about everybody in that respect. You are listening to A Different Perspective on the X Zone Broadcast Network, and we'll be back right after this. So hang around for a while, see what else we come up with. I am here with John Greenewald. We've been talking UAPs, UFOs, and the Navy, and that sort of thing. When we went away, I had mentioned the document that Stan Friedman held up frequently with everything blacked out, but a couple of words here and there. And John, you had an interesting anecdote about that, or something you wanted to add?
Yeah. So that's called the Yates Affidavit, and essentially that was a memorandum / report, whatever you want to call it, that was submitted to a judge that was overseeing a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit for hundreds of what are called comment reports or communication intelligence that were all about UFOs. They were withheld in full. And this essentially what Stan would hold up, which was visually, very interesting looking, blacked out top to bottom. But that was the reason, the top secret reason they withheld all of those documents. Well, the hundreds of other comment reports, they stayed hidden for many, many years. And finally, after years of fighting, I was able to get a couple hundred of them, and most of them were whited out and blacked out. Now, fast forward to about probably 5-6 years ago now, I talked earlier in the show about the mandatory declassification review. I created a case that forced the NSA to review all of those hundreds of comment reports, because even though what Stan held up was interesting, some of those redactions are lifted, not all. Some is still fairly heavily redacted, but they say it's all sources and methods. I went after the documents they were talking about. And so not what Stan would hold up, but the hundreds of others. And wouldn't you know that the NSA said they lost every single one of them, 100% across the board. So what they tried to claim was that the comment reports all on UFOs, we know that for a fact, was either whited out or blacked out. And then they took only the redacted copy and saved it and then shredded the originals. That's according to them. Not the only time that's happened with the intelligence community, but I wanted to point out there's a really interesting underlying story there that sadly is seemingly lost to the shredders because all of that material is now gone.
Well, I will point out, and I think it's the reason that the estimate of the situation that we talk about, the famous estimate of the situation back in the 1940s, it supposedly concluded that UFOs or flying saucers were extraterrestrial, was declassified and then shredded. And I was trying to figure out, why would you declassify it and then throw it out? If it's declassified, it's not that important. Why do it? And it's because if it's classified, you have to create a document saying it's been destroyed. And if it's a secret or top secret, you have to put down the name of the document and that sort of thing. So by declassifying it first, you can destroy the paper trail that it ever existed.
Interesting.
I think that's part of what you run into there as well. If we don't declassify it, we can't destroy it anonymously. Mm-hmm. But if we declassify it first, then we don't have to create the documentation to show that it was properly declassified. When we went to the break, I also promised that we would talk briefly about abduction. What's your take on the abduction tales? I've broadly of a question.
Sure. Yeah, it's very broad. It's one angle of this topic that I, of course, am intrigued by, in the sense that the stories are interesting. But for me, I'm just not a big advocate for pushing that into the forefront, saying, hey, look at this, look at this. One of the more interesting ones for me is the more famous Betty and Barney Hill case. And just simply because I think it's just so iconic in this particular niche of ufology. And when I was producing for History Channel, we did the last recorded interview on tape, on video, with Betty before she had passed away. And I wish that, I think I still have them, the raw actual interview that never made it to air. I mean, parts of it did, obviously, but with a History Channel show, you sit in front of a camera for 90 minutes and then you're on screen for like a minute and a half. That was essentially what it was. But I think somewhere I have the dump of the whole interview. But in that respect, I'm interested. But for me, I'm a very nuts and bolts, evidence-driven kind of guy. And the abduction phenomena, again, albeit interesting, doesn't quite have those nuts and bolts for me to really go, aha, this is happening. We need to put this in front of Congress, or whatever some people think we should do with it.
Well, that's the one thing that's always struck me about it too, is we have some really interesting stories, but there are terrestrial explanations for some of them. And I've mentioned this periodically in the program. I think sleep paralysis is a viable explanation for some
Yeah.
Not all, but some cases of alien abduction. But I balk at the idea of the longitudinal studies where they come into the bedrooms and take people out year after year after year after year, and they're unable to gather any kind of concrete evidence. And it seems to me there'd be all sorts of ways of gathering at least something like that. So I worry about that. But I also say that cases like Barney and Betty Hill or Travis Walton's, the one-offs where they're sort of targets of opportunity, seem more plausible to me than those sorts of things. And since I mentioned Travis Walton, we know that there's been some controversy with Mike Rogers and Travis Walton, that sort of thing. Have you looked into that very deeply or very much at all?
Well, with the controversy, you mean? I mean,
The latest.
Yeah, I'm aware of what's going on, and to be honest with you, it's one of those things that it's like, why now? Why after all these years does he have to come out and start saying it's all a hoax? There's been umpteen opportunities to do that. I personally don't know Mike. I have met Travis numerous times at various conferences and spent time with him and stuff like that. And so I don't want to say there's a bias in there, but since I know one and I don't know the other, I don't want to just say, that guy's making it up, Travis is telling the truth. I don't know. I can say that just from firsthand experience, Travis seems very genuine to me when he tells the story. I've been in settings with him in very big public settings and very private settings, where very, very select few people, we were all having dinner kind of thing. And so again, just very much strikes me as a very genuine person. That to me, I can't just equate that to he's telling the truth, but in the same respect, I don't really see him as somebody that is just sitting there lying through his teeth and then somebody else is coming out to blow it out of the water. Again, my biggest question is why now? Like, why all of a sudden do we have to, go through this now? And, it's one of those things in ufology that if it's not controversial, then it's not in ufology. I mean, it just seems to like a magnet attract this controversy. Sometimes it takes months after a story surfaces. Obviously, sometimes it takes decades, but controversy is always there.
I'm not sure that Mike Rogers has ever said that it was a hoax.
I thought that's what he was coming out and saying.
He was. I think he hinted around at that sort of thing, but he never really came out and said that. One of the things that he's pushing in today's environment is, well, nobody saw Travis being abducted. And you go back and you look at the entire story and say, well, that's true. They weren't there when Travis was supposedly taken on board the ship. They saw him hit by the beam and knocked down, but they didn't see him abducted per se. And so I think that I
thought there was a record. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought there was a recording. I listened to a recording where I thought he outright said it, and then Travis has come on to a couple shows and essentially rebutted that.
My impression was he really didn't quite get to the point of saying it was a hoax, but he kind of beat around that bush. I'll have to go back and listen to the one program again to see exactly what it was. I know when I've talked to Mike Rogers about this, he's been a little bit circumspect when I've talked to him. The earlier fight was, I think, more of a personal fight between Walton and Rogers, and I corresponded with both of them about that, and it seemed to have nothing to really do with the abduction experience, but more with personal problems. And I thought at that point, well, there's really no need for me to be involved in this, nor does the UFO committee need to be involved in this, because it's the personal problem with these two guys. It has nothing to do with the abduction experience. So I don't know. I lean toward the idea that the abductions are terrestrially based in some fashion, although there's a possibility of maybe some extraterrestrial involvement. I lean toward the terrestrial. So, that's kind of where I am.
Yeah. I'm with you. And I think for me, the reason why I stay away from it, and I hope this doesn't come off wrong, I'm not targeting anybody specifically, but there will be a percentage, not 100, but there will be a percentage where there is a psychological explanation, something that may not be what people want to hear, but rather more of a psychological explanation versus extraterrestrial. And it becomes a very sensitive area to start diving into that and saying, well, your particular case, it sounds like, you were sleepwalking and you just think it happened, but it didn't. And it becomes very sensitive, to many people. And that's part of the reason why I've stayed away from it, just simply because it gets into a territory that's just not fun to be in, because you are, when you look at somebody and they're just 100% trying to be genuine with you and they truly believe it happened, there is a possibility that they 100% believe it happened, but it didn't. And it's like, what do? Do you fight them, and try and say, no, this is all in your head, when in some cases that actually might be true. But in order to get there, you're going to have to upset and hurt a lot of people. And that's just a territory I just stay away from.
That's a very good point. And the other thing, I argued with Phil Klass at one point. He said, well, we should give the people lie detector tests. And I said, why? They believe what they're telling us. They're not going to come out as fraudulent or deceptive in the lie detector. It's going to come out that they're telling the truth, and that's not going to prove anything one way or another. And so I understand what you're saying, and there's psychological problems involved, there's sleep paralysis involved, but there may be something else involved that we're not aware of.
Yeah,
that's where we have a stumbling block, and I think
exactly. And I do want to stress, like, I don't think that 100% are those psychological problems.
Not at all.
But yeah, that for it to be a portion thereof, that's where it gets very sensitive.
Yeah, absolutely. John, I think we're out of time here. Want to thank you for taking an hour out of your valuable time when you could be filing FOIA requests with everybody in the known universe and spending it with us. Appreciate you hanging around. Your book is Inside the Black Vault. Of course, the website is theblackvault.com. It's very easy to find. One of the bigger websites out there now. Thank you, John.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks again.
You have a good day.
You as well.
That was John Greenewald, as you all know. I just wanted to mention before he goes away that my latest book is UFOs and the Deep State. It was published not that long ago. And it's about how the deep state has kept the story of UFOs out of the public arena. We've discussed that a little bit with John Greenewald today as well. The tricks of the trade, the way the bureaucrats can manipulate the situation to keep the elected officials from learning what they wanted. I think if I'd written this book this year, I would have reinforced the impressions that the deep state by pointing out those in the position of power, the way they manipulate the system, the way they can avoid answering the questions. And we saw a little bit of that with the UAP report. Doesn't really tell us much, but it lived up to their obligation to produce a report by June 25th. And we'll be having another report in 90 days, I guess, which might be more of the same sort of thing. I also kind of wanted to talk about, I've done a book called The Best of Project Blue Book. When we take a look at the Project Blue Book files in the past, we didn't have access to them. We had to believe what we were being told. And we find out by going through those case files carefully that all is not what we were told. Things are in those files that the government sort of denied. One of the better explanations, one of the better examples, I should say, is the idea that there were only 3 people who saw an object in level land. But in the Project Blue Book files, if you go through them carefully, you find witness testimony up to 5 people having seen the objects. And the Air Force did interview a number of people who were in fact there and saw the object. So the number goes up beyond that. We bring all of that to bear in the book, The Best of Project Blue Book, or The Best of Project Blue Book. I will be joined next by Peter Robbins. We'll be talking about investigative techniques mostly. We'll touch briefly on Travis Walton. We'll touch briefly on the Bentwaters Rendlesham Forest case that Peter has investigated at length, and has some interesting insights to that. So that we'll take a look at that. And I'm hoping to get Robert Schaefer back here in the next couple of weeks as well to look at the skeptical side of the UFO problem. Saying all that, I will tell you that you have been listening to A Different Perspective on the X Zone Broadcast Network. I'll be back in about 167 hours with more incredible information about UFOs. Thanks for tuning in.